They said the war was over. But endings have a strange way of echoing, don't they? Smoke still rose like a stubborn memory, curling around broken roofs and skeletal trees. The village was nothing but bones and silence, and through this graveyard of what once was, she walked. Mara. Her steps were slow, careful, as if she were afraid she might wake the dead. Her face was plain, unremarkable, the kind of face the world forgets first, especially when there are grand battles and heroes to remember. She had no medals pinned to her chest, no glorious stories of heroism to tell around a fire. All she had was a worn wooden spoon and a stubborn heart that refused to stop beating. Everyone else had left. They called her foolish for staying. "There's nothing left for you here, Mara," they'd pleaded. And maybe they were right. Maybe she was foolish. Or maybe, just maybe, she simply couldn't bring herself to leave the ashes she loved. Because these ashes weren't just dust and rubble. They were memories. She remembered the laughter that used to dance through these alleys, the rich, warm smell of baked bread that promised comfort and community. Now, the air tasted only of rust and grief, but a memory is a powerful thing. It can be a ghost, or it can be a seed. Beneath the debris of what was once her home, she found it. A cracked, cast-iron stove. With a grunt, she heaved it upright, a small act of defiance, as if she were setting the world straight again, one piece at a time. She gathered dry twigs and broken bits of wood, her hands moving with a purpose they hadn't felt in a long time. She struck a match. And then, fire. The smallest, most beautiful rebellion against despair. As the smoke began to rise, it carried her heartbeat with it, a signal to the empty sky that something was still alive down here. She found a pot, dented but whole, and filled it with water from the old well. She set it on the flame and began to stir, the motion as familiar and comforting as an old prayer. There was no salt, no vegetables, not even a grain of rice. It was just a pot of boiling hope. But in that steam, in the gentle bubbling of the water, there was a promise. A promise that life, however fragile, could begin again. That night, as darkness draped itself over the ruins, a figure emerged from the shadows. A man, limping through the rubble. A soldier. His uniform was torn, his face smeared with grime, and his eyes were as hollow and empty as burnt-out coals. He saw the flicker of her fire, a tiny star in a universe of black. He stumbled towards it, drawn by its impossible warmth. He stopped before her and managed a single, raspy word. Food. Nothing more. Nothing more. No, please. No, thank you. No explanation of who he was or where he'd come from. Who's that one desperate word? Mara looked at him. She didn't ask whose side he had fought on. She didn't ask what flag he had carried in the face of such profound hunger, such complete exhaustion. Those things had ceased to matter. She saw not a soldier, but a human being hanging on by a thread. Without a word, she filled a chipped bowl with the hot water and handed it to him. He took it, his hands trembling slightly. He sat on a pile of bricks in drank without ever looking up. The steam fogged his face, hiding his expression, creating a small, private world around him. In that shared silence, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the sound of his sipping, something human flickered back to life. Maybe it was mercy. Maybe it was just sheer fatigue. Maybe it was a shared understanding that they were both survivors, clinging to the edge. And for the first time since the bombs had stopped falling, Mara smiled. It wasn't a big, joyful smile. It was small, fragile, and tired. But it was real. She smiled not because things were suddenly better, or because the world had been fixed. She smiled because in the midst of all this destruction, she was still capable of kindness. And that, she realized, was a victory in itself. The wind moaned through the ruins, carrying the whispers of all those who had left, all the voices that were now just echoes. But here, in this small circle of light, something new was happening. The kitchen, her kitchen, was alive again. The fire spoke its soft, crackling language. The pot was ready for more than just water. One forgotten woman, armed with a wooden spoon and an unbreakable spirit, had become the heartbeat of a dying village. She had chosen not to run from the ashes, but to plant a garden in them. She was a reminder that even after the loudest wars, the quietest acts of hope can be the most powerful. They don't rebuild cities overnight, but they rebuild humanity. One bowl of soup, one act of kindness at a time. And sometimes, that's all it takes to bring a world back from the brink. Morning returned like a wounded animal. Gray, slow, limping. Mara lit the fire again. Same ritual, same defiance. Each spark a refusal to vanish. The soldier Sergei, Shilonard returned. He stood in the doorway, a shadow painted in smoke. "You'll get yourself killed," he said. She didn't answer. She was too busy keeping the flame alive. By noon, two small faces peeked through the cracks in the wall. A girl, Lena, maybe 8. Her little brother, Amir, clutching her hand. "Do you have bread?" the girl asked. Mara looked at them. Two skeletons wrapped in skin. She tore what was left of yesterday's loaf. They ate in silence, crumbs falling like blessings. Sergei watched, uneasy. "You can't feed everyone." "I can try," she said. Outside, boots thundered, voices barked orders. War had returned wearing a different uniform. The new patrol swept through the village like a storm. Their leader, Captain Hughes, a man whose voice cut through bone. He kicked open her door, found her stirring soup. "You cook for us now," he said. Mara didn't look up. The spoon kept moving. The sound of boiling water answered for her. That evening, soldiers filled her kitchen. Laughter, sharp, hollow. Guns resting beside bowls. Sergei leaned near her ear. "You shouldn't stay." "I already stayed," she whispered. Outside, Lena and Amir waited in the cold. She slipped them bread under the table. They vanished into the night like smoke. When the soldiers slept, she sat beside the dying fire and stared at the embers. Each spark reminded her that resistance doesn't always carry a gun. Sometimes it carries a spoon. She wasn't fighting the war. She was fighting the forgetting. The next morning, the sky was the color of ash. Rain without mercy fell on broken roofs. Her supplies were gone. The soldiers had eaten everything. Still, the patrol wanted more. Mara walked into the woods, her shoes heavy with mud, her breath clouding in the cold. She gathered wild roots, bitter herbs, leaves that smelled like sorrow. When she returned, Sergei stood waiting. He looked tired. "Why do you keep doing this?" She smiled faintly. "Because someone has to remember how to care." That night, she cooked again. Not a meal, but a message, something alive inside the dead world. The soldiers circled the fire, hungry, mocking. The captain dipped his spoon, frowned. "What does this taste?" She said, "Hope." He laughed, cruel and short. "Hope tastes bitter." "So does truth," she answered. Silence spread like smoke. No one laughed again that night. Later, she sat with Sergei near the doorway. "They're leaving tomorrow," he whispered. "Orders from command." "Then I'll cook one last time," she said. He looked at her, puzzled. "You could escape. Go with the children." She shook her head. "My place is here." The oven isn't done speaking, he wanted to argue, but her calmness silenced him. While the camp slept, she wrote something on the wall with a piece of charcoal. Just a few words, words she hoped would outlive her. She turned back to the pot, added the last handful of herbs, and stirred until dawn. The morning came wrapped in mist. The world smelled of wet stone and smoke. Mara built her fire once more. Flames trembled, as if they too were tired of surviving. Sergei entered quietly, his voice low. "They'll come soon." "I know," she said. Her hands didn't stop moving. Lena and Amir appeared from behind the door, eyes bright with something that looked almost like hope. She gave them each a bowl. "Eat slowly," she said. "It's the last of the good flour." They asked if she would come with them. She smiled. "This fire belongs here. Someone has to keep it burning." Outside, engines rumbled. Orders shouted. The war was moving again. She turned to Sergei. Take 'em when the noise starts. Follow the riverino de Donce. No promises, just understanding. The door burst open. Captain Hughes stepped in, eyes wild. Pack up. You leave now. Mara wiped her hands on her apron. We already did. He looked around. The hearth cold. The pots empty. The room heavy with smoke. Outside, in the fog, villagers slipped away. Children first. Then the wounded. Then Sergei. Only Mara remained, standing before the fading fire. She whispered to it, "Don't go out yet." The captain shouted, but his voice was swallowed by distance. Hours later, silence reclaimed the village. Then a faint sound, the soft crackle of fire returning to life. Ashes shifting, embers glowing red beneath gray dust. Mara was gone. Or maybe not. Some said they saw her walking through the ruins at dusk, hands covered in soot, face lit by the same stubborn light. Maybe the fire never needed wood. Maybe it just needed her name. Because every village that rises again starts with someone who refuses to stop feeding hope. They will tell stories of generals, of victories, of graves. But someone must tell this one the story of a woman who fought a war with bread and fire. The bombs stopped whispering. The world moved on. Yet somewhere, under the weight of forgotten ruins, a single oven still breathes, and its smoke carries her voice. Mara's fire still burns, forever in the ashes.